Go to church. Go to church. Every week, go to church. I really can't state enough how important this is. And I am done apologizing for saying it this way. Because I don't think it helps anybody to beat around the bush. You get formed as a Christian, and your kids get formed as Christians by going to church. Doesn't have to be this one. There are fine, wonderful Christian churches all up and down this street. You can't throw a rock without hitting two wonderful Christian churches. Go to one of them. Come to this one. But go to church every week. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Go to church every week. Doggone it. I'm not kidding about this. So that's the theme of this sermon. And you might wonder how I get to that theme from today's readings. Well, follow me. What kind of church is St. Francis? What brand of church are we? Yes, Episcopal church. We are Episcopalians. Why? Primarily because of the American Revolution. We were the Church of England in the colonies. But after the War of Independence, we could no longer pledge fealty to the Queen, to the monarchy, to the crown, and so we split off and became the Anglican or English Church in America. And the word Anglican, even that was too much for us. It means English, right? So we went with Episcopal. What does Episcopal mean? It means that we have bishops. So we're the Episcopal Church, but really what we are is the Anglican Church in America. Okay. So we're Episcopalians because of the Revolution. And then we are Protestants because of the Reformation. Okay, the Reformation, when Martin Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and others started a movement to break away from the Roman Catholic Church. And we, the Church of England, we were the expression of that in England, this Protestant Reformation. So Episcopalian because of the Revolution, Protestant because of the Reformation. But English was Catholic before it was Protestant. And it was Catholic because a guy by the name of Augustine, the Bishop Augustine of Canterbury, was sent there to build a church. This is in the 6th century. And before England was Catholic, Rome was Catholic, and really before that, everybody was more or less Catholic, probably with a small c, but more or less the Catholic Church. And before that, everybody was just Christian. But there was a time before that when our people were really just Christ-following Jews. And we might still be Christ-following Jews today if we hadn't been kicked out of the Jewish synagogues for our stubborn insistence on the reality of the miracle of the resurrection. And when we got kicked out of the synagogues, we resorted to the universal grade school tactic used to this day on playgrounds around the world, where we said, well, we didn't really want to be part of your club anyway. So we went our own direction. But before Jesus, our people really were full-blooded, card-carrying, circumcised, Sabbath-following, Torah-believing Jews. And our people were given a particular expression of what we believe today to be a universal creator. God chose to be in covenantal relationship with our people. Do you believe what I have just said? Okay, you're with me so far. Well, that brings me to the gospel. Matthew's gospel. Matthew's community of Christ-following Jews were particularly angry about how they had been kicked out of the synagogue. And it all comes out in lots of different ways in all kinds of verses in this particular gospel of Matthew. You hear it over and over. You can hear the anger and the resentment underlined, even some of Matthew's profound theological points. Watch for words like Jews. It's supposed to be kind of said snarling like that. Sadducees. Especially Pharisees. Scholars believe that Jesus would have been raised a Pharisee probably, and so Pharisees are the object of much of Matthew's scorn. So here we are today in Matthew's gospel, and Matthew is telling us his version of the last week of Matthew's earthly ministry, of Jesus' earthly ministry. Are you still with me? Stay with me. Okay, here we go. I'm going a long way, and you're coming with me. Okay, so if you've been here the past several weeks, you know that this tension has been building in the text, in Matthew's text. And today it reaches sort of a climax as the Pharisees ask Jesus why he doesn't pay more attention to the law and to the prophets and to the writings and to the commandments. And Jesus speaks, and Matthew records the 4 sentences that have become the bedrock of our Christ-following, previously Jewish movement. Here they are. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophet. Right? I just want to see if you're still paying attention. Right? So, because you have to know this by now. Geez, we say it every week, don't we? Right? The first commandment, the second commandment, hang all the law and the prophets. Now, I spend nearly all of my time, excuse me, I spend nearly all of my time as a pastor and as a preacher talking to anyone who will listen about that second part. The one about you shall love your neighbor as yourself. We're all, lots of sermons today are going to be preached about that second one. And I think the reason that I do that is because it is in my experience and in my own life and my observation of those around me, loving our neighbor as ourselves is something we most often refuse to do. We could do it, but we refuse to do it. And I think we need to change that if we are going to have any hope of ever living in peace with one another, which is what I think the kingdom of heaven should look like. We don't do the first one because we don't want to. We could, but we don't want to. We don't do the second one. We don't do the second one because we don't want to. It's the first one that I'm talking about today. We don't do the first one either, but not because we don't want to, but rather, I think, because we don't know how to. This is my point. And I want to talk to you about that. The first one. The second one, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. We don't do that because we don't want to, right? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. We don't do that one because we don't know how to. It's first for a reason. What do you think that reason is? It's first for a reason. It's not second, it's first. And if you think about it, it really makes no sense to work on the second step until you do the first step. What's the first step? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. The reason I told you about our people started out this first 5 minutes, right? The reason I told you that is our people have been trying to get this right ever since Moses saw the burning bush and heard the voice of the Lord our God and learned that God doesn't have a name, but God has a being. And our people have been trying to figure this out ever since the Lord our God called Abraham from the land of the Chaldeans and said, I will be your God and you will be my people. And all this time, all these millennia, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, pick your thousands, all these years, God has really asked only one thing of us and our people. And do you know what it is? Loyalty. That's all God has ever asked of us. The Hebrew word for it is hesed. which means covenantal relationship. Old Testament scholar and personal Mark Selby hero Walter Brueggemann calls it God's desire for fidelity. Loyalty, fidelity, covenant, they all mean the same thing. They all mean this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. What would this look like, do you think? I have been trying to figure this out all week. And I really don't have any great examples. Probably because this is a singular kind of love. It is unlike any love that you can experience anywhere else in life. This fidelity, this covenantal hesed. It looks like taking care of the poor and the needy among us. It looks like loving your neighbor. It looks like that. But, hear me, it is much more than that. And I'll tell you how I know that. I know lots of wonderful and generous people who do so much for their neighbors and for the poor and for their needy. Lots more than I do. But they don't give a hoot about the God of the Hebrews. They don't give a hoot about the God that I worship. But they do wonderful works. Doesn't make them bad. Just doesn't make them Christian. My point is, if we're going to be Christian, we have got to first get that first and great commandment right. Before we get to loving neighbor, and I know this might sound like heresy to some of you, but before we get to loving neighbor, before we get to the second one, we need to get the first one right, which is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. Be faithful first to God. It really is all that God ever asked of us. And only thing I'm able to come up with, you guys, is come to church. Like, just start with that. Come to church every week. Why? First of all, I love seeing you. Second of all, you're beautiful. Third of all, it's what we do. We worship. Who do we worship here? I'm glad you got that one right. Excellent. That, if you didn't get that right, we had to start over. We worship God here. Yeah? Every week. Be faithful first to God. That's all God ever asked of us. Love God with all you've got, all the time, all the way. Go all in with the Lord your God. And I can't tell you with any certainty what that looks like for you. I can barely tell you what it looks like for me. But I am telling you, this is the big one, right? This is the one to pay attention to. This is the only one that matters, because until and unless you get this one, nothing else does matter between you and God. You can be, I can guarantee you, you can be a good person without it. You just can't be a Christian.